the hero of the Black Forest. Once upon a time, there was a small village nestled deep in the heart of the Black Forest. The villagers lived simple lives, tending to their crops and livestock, but they were always aware of the dark and mysterious forest that surrounded them. They whispered of strange creatures that lurked in the shadows and of spirits that roamed the trees. One day, a young woman named Sarah arrived in the village. She was an enigmatic figure, with long black hair and piercing green eyes. The villagers were initially wary of her, but her kind demeanor and gentle smile quickly won them over. She took up residence in a small cottage on the outskirts of the village, and it wasn't long before she became known for her knowledge of medicinal herbs and her skill at healing the sick. However, there were some in the village who whispered that Sarah was not what she seemed. They claimed that she was a witch, using her powers for evil. Some even said that they had seen her at night, dancing in the forest under the light of the full moon. One summer's night, a terrible storm swept through the village. The winds were so strong that many of the villagers' homes were destroyed. When the storm finally passed, the villagers found that their crops had been ruined and that their livestock were missing. In the midst of this chaos, the villagers discovered that Sarah was missing. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but there was no sign of Sarah. The villagers' worries turned to fear, and rumors began to circulate that she had been taken by the evil spirits of the forest. One night, a group of villagers decided to venture into the forest to search for Sarah. They brought torches and weapons, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. However, as they stepped into the forest, the torches flickered and went out, and the villagers were enveloped in darkness. They could hear the sound of whispers and laughter all around them, but they could not see where it was coming from. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them. It was Sarah, but she was not the same woman they had known. Her eyes were dark and sinister, and her smile was twisted and cruel. She told the villagers that she had been taken by the spirits of the forest, and that she had been granted great power. But in exchange for her power, she had been forced to embrace the darkness, and she could never leave the forest. The villagers were horrified, and they quickly realized that they were not alone in the forest. All around them, they could hear the sound of footsteps, and the shadows seemed to come alive. They turned to flee, but Sarah called out to them, her voice echoing through the trees. "You will never leave this forest," she said. "You are mine now, and I will keep you here forever." And with that, the villagers were consumed by the shadows. They were never seen or heard from again. From that day on, the villagers of the small village in the Black Forest whispered of the evil witch who lived in the forest. They warned their children never to venture into the trees, for fear of meeting the same fate as those who had gone before them. And to this day, the villagers still speak of the horrors that lurk in the darkness of the Black Forest, waiting to claim their next victims. Years passed, and the story of Sarah and the Black Forest became a legend, a cautionary tale passed down from generation to generation. However, there were still those who were drawn to the mystery and the darkness of the forest, despite the warnings. One such person was a young woman named Emma. She was a scholar, studying the folklore and legends of the area. She was fascinated by the story of Sarah, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Emma arrived in the village and made her way to the forest. She was armed with her knowledge and her courage, but she was also filled with fear. The deeper she went into the forest, the more she could feel the darkness closing in around her. The trees seemed to come alive, their branches reaching out to grab her. She could hear whispers on the wind, and she was sure she was being watched. Finally, she came upon a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a cottage, just as the legend had described. Emma approached the cottage, her heart pounding in her chest. She pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The cottage was filled with the sickly sweet smell of decay and rot. The furniture was covered in cobwebs, and the walls were covered in strange symbols and markings. Emma was filled with dread, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As she explored the cottage, she came upon a book, bound in leather and covered in dust. She opened the book and began to read. The pages were filled with the story of Sarah, the young woman who had come to the village so many years before. But there was something different about this story, something that set it apart from the legend. Emma read on, fascinated, as she learned that Sarah had been a victim, not a villain. She had been taken by the spirits of the forest, just as the legend claimed, but she had not embraced the darkness. Instead, she had fought against it, using her knowledge of medicinal herbs and her powers of healing to keep the darkness at bay. But Sarah had been fighting a losing battle, and she knew that one day the darkness would consume her. And so, she had written this book, a record of her struggle, in the hope that one day someone would find it and understand the truth. Emma was filled with sadness as she realized that Sarah had died alone in the forest, her battle against the darkness lost. She closed the book and made her way back out of the cottage. As she stepped out into the clearing, she heard a voice. "Do not be afraid," the voice said. "I have been waiting for you." Emma turned to face the voice, and she saw Sarah, standing before her. But this was not the Sarah of legend, with twisted smile and sinister eyes. This was the Sarah of the book, with kind eyes and gentle smile. "Thank you for finding my book," Sarah said. "I have been trapped in this forest for so long, and I have been unable to leave. But now, because of you, my story will be told, and the truth will be known. You have set me free." And with that, Sarah vanished, and Emma was left alone in the clearing. She made her way back to the village, her heart filled with a sense of peace and hope. She shared the story of Sarah with the villagers, and they were amazed. They had been so wrong about the young woman all these years. Emma stayed in the village for a time, continuing her research and sharing the story of Sarah. And when she finally left, she took the book with her, preserving the legacy of the brave young woman who had fought against the darkness in the Black Forest. But Emma was not the only one who had been affected by the story. Others began to travel to the forest, seeking out the cottage and the truth about Sarah. And slowly, over time, the legend of the Black Forest began to change. No longer was Sarah seen as a villain, but as a hero, who had bravely fought against the evil spirits of the forest. And so, the Black Forest became a place of pilgrimage, a symbol of hope and bravery in the face of darkness. People came from far and wide, seeking to pay homage to Sarah and her bravery, and to bask in the light that had been cast upon the forest by her unwavering spirit. But there were those who whispered that the darkness was still there, lurking in the shadows of the forest, waiting for its next victim. And there were those who claimed that on certain nights, when the moon was full and the shadows were deep, you could still hear the whispers on the wind, and see the shadows moving in the trees. And so the story of Sarah and the Black Forest remains, a warning to all who would venture into the dark and unknown, and a testament to the power of courage and hope in the face of fear. The end.